All right, welcome. Today we're going on a bit of a journey. It's a story that starts way, way back in the minds of ancient philosophers. And it ends, well, it ends right here, with some of the biggest, toughest problems we're all facing today.
So let's just dive right in with a question that I'm sure has crossed your mind. I know it's crossed mine probably more times than I can count. You're watching the news, you see what's going on, and you just find yourself thinking, why? Why does it seem so incredibly hard for them to just do the right thing? Why does politics feel like it's operating in a totally different moral universe sometimes? That question, that's going to be our North Star for this whole deep dive.
Because what we're really talking about here is this huge, fundamental clash at the heart of public life. You felt it, right? That massive gap between the noble ideals we want our leaders to champion and the, let's face it, the messy, complicated, and often pretty brutal reality of what it takes to get and keep power.
And hey, this is not a new problem, not by a long shot. The ancient Greek playwright Sophocles absolutely nailed it more than 2,000 years ago. Power, he said, is the ultimate test. It's a magnifying glass for character. I mean, just think about it for a second. We see this play out all the time, everywhere from a local school board meeting to a massive international summit. This tension between your personal conscience and what you have to do in public, it's been with us forever. It's the ultimate stage where our ethics are put to the test. But just because the problem's been around forever doesn't mean people have just thrown up their hands and given up. Actually, quite the opposite. Some of the most brilliant minds in history have spent their entire lives trying to create a kind of toolkit, a set of blueprints, really, for how to build a better, more ethical world. So let's do a quick sprint through this amazing conversation across history. It really kicks off in classical Greece with the heavyweights, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. These guys were the first to really sit down and systematically ask, what does it even mean to be a good person? Then the conversation evolves. In the Hellenistic period, thinkers like Epicurus start looking inward, focusing more on individual happiness. You fast forward a bunch to the Enlightenment, and bam, you get this explosion of thought from people like Rousseau and Kant, who argued that reason, our own ability to think logically, should be our moral compass. And that brings us to the modern era, where thinkers like Mill, Marx, and Nietzsche had to wrestle with all the new ethical headaches that came with industrial society and this radical new focus on the individual. It's a huge ongoing debate, and we're about to jump right into the middle of it. And right at the very start of it all is this incredibly powerful idea from Socrates. For the Greeks, being a moral person wasn't just about following a list of rules. No, it was about self-examination. It was about doing the tough but crucial work of asking yourself, why? Why do you believe the things you believe? Why do you do the things you do? Seriously, when was the last time you really sat down and did that? Now, Aristotle, who was Socrates' student's student, he took this idea and ran with it. He said the ultimate goal in life is something he called eudaimonia. Now, we often translate that word as happiness, but honestly, that doesn't even come close. It's not about just feeling good. For Aristotle, eudaimonia was about human flourishing. It's about reaching your absolute full potential as a thinking, virtuous human being. It's about a life of purpose, not just a life of pleasure. Think about the people you really look up to. Chances are they're not just happy, they're flourishing. That's eudaimonia.
Okay, so these early thinkers gave us this foundation of self-reflection and human flourishing. But these weren't just sleepy academic ideas. Oh no, they basically set the stage for a massive conflict, a real war of ideas about who we are as people and the right way to run a society. And this slide, wow, it just lays out the two polar opposite sides of this debate perfectly. On one side, you've got Thomas Hobbes. He looked at humanity and saw a chaotic, selfish free-for-all. His solution? We need a super powerful ruler, a Leviathan, to keep us all in line and save us from ourselves. But then, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He argued the exact opposite. He believed we're born good, we're born free, and it's society itself, with all its messed up rules and inequalities, that corrupts us. So which is it? Are we wired to be selfish and need a firm hand? Or are we naturally good people who get twisted by a broken system? This question, this is everything. It's the philosophical DNA behind almost every major political debate we have today.
And trust me, this is not just some old debate for a history class. This centuries-old argument is alive and well. In fact, it's the modern battlefield, where the outcomes have massive, real-world consequences for every single one of us.
Because how we as a society answer that fundamental question, whether we lean more towards control or towards freedom, towards individual success or the collective good, that directly shapes the world we wake up in every single morning. This isn't theory. This is the reality we are all living in right now.
Let's make this real. Look at this number. 3. That's it. The wealth of just 3 individuals is more than the entire economic output of the 48 poorest nations on Earth combined. Just let that sit with you for a second. 3 people. Okay, now let's look at another number. $44 billion. According to the UN, that's roughly what it would cost per year to provide every single person on the planet with the absolute basics: education, healthcare, and enough food. Now, I know $44 billion sounds like a mountain of money, right? But just to put that in perspective, it's a fraction of what the world spends on its militaries. It's less than what people spend on pet food globally every year. And here is the real gut punch. That $44 billion, it represents less than 4% of the combined wealth of just the 225 richest people in the world. So the resources, the actual money to solve these huge problems, it's there. It's not a scarcity problem, it's a concentration problem. And that makes the ethical question crystal clear. If we can do it, why aren't we? So if the problem isn't a lack of resources, then what is it? Why does this kind of mind-boggling inequality stick around? Well, that brings us to the arguments, the justifications, the excuses that people use to kind of explain it all away. And I bet you've heard a few of these before. Our source material has a great word for these, coartadas, which basically means alibis or excuses. And they probably sound pretty familiar, right? We've all heard them. Oh, poverty is an individual's fault. It's just laziness. Or, look, massive inequality is just the natural price of progress. It's inevitable. Or, how about this one? Solidarity? That's an old-fashioned idea. In today's world, it's every man for himself. And maybe the most dangerous one of all, the end justifies the means. That some people's suffering is just an acceptable cost for some greater good down the line. These aren't just opinions. These are the ethical roadblocks that stop us from making real change. And all of this brings us to one last really sharp insight from the philosopher Charles Taylor. He points out something fascinating about our modern world. Our science, our tech, our economies, we have become unbelievably good at figuring out the how. How to be more efficient, how to make more money, how to build bigger, faster, stronger. We are absolute masters of how. But, and this is the huge question, in our obsession with how, have we completely forgotten to ask why? Why are we doing all this? What's the point of all this wealth and all this progress? What is the purpose of it all? That, my friends, is the question of ethics, and it's one we just can't afford to keep ignoring. So I'll leave you with that to think about. What why do you think we should all be working for?